Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sherborn School Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 11:35. And I would also like to thank everybody for being very flexible and creative with their schedules so that we could have this meeting, especially Amanda, who rearranged a bunch of family things so we could have a quorum here. So thank you. And with that, if we could start with Dr. Brown's report, please. Oh, nope, I'm sorry, community comments. Hearing none, then we'll move to Dr. Brown, please.
Well, good morning, everyone. I haven't submitted a formal report because our last couple of get-togethers have been through joint meetings. So you can see from November, December, and January all of the professional development and enrichment activities that have happened at Pine Hill School. When I see them in list format, it's an impressive list. I wanted to highlight especially dynamic professional development related to all of our cultural proficiency, multicultural, and social justice work. Last Wednesday, we contracted with a consultant from Ideas who has worked with members in our school community up until now. And the Pine Hill faculty was able to go deeper in considering ways to bring broader perspective to all of our units of study. We started talking conversations about Thanksgiving and Columbus Day and the resources we use through poetry and mathematics and reading and writing and science and social studies. And the teachers are really excited to revitalize the resources and voices in our curriculum.
Barb, can I interrupt for 1 second? I think we're missing pages on this, so we don't have that actual list.
We have one more, maybe?
Is it, how many pages is it?
It's 2 pages?
Yeah, we don't have the second page. So, just so you know, we're not following along on your list.
Okay.
Perfect.
Another piece I wanted to highlight, we're eagerly awaiting the DSEF grant process to get underway and take hold. It was exciting this year to see grant requests that have come directly out of our work with the school goals and the district strategic plan, around play, around innovation, around redesigning classroom space and how we think about space that children learn in. And you'll notice if there are many more grants that the elementaries and the elementary, middle, and high schools partnered with this year. So that's a testament to all of the great work that's going on behind the scenes. And I also wanted to provide an update that our preschool enrollment is set for next year. All of our families have been notified if they have a spot or if they didn't get in and they want to be on the wait list. And as you know, I shared that we finally modernized our school registration process, so it should be really efficient for families. It's now, it will be distributed the Monday after vacation to families, but it will be electronic and consolidated, and we're excited to, we have confirmations for families that are what we call pre-registered, and then the official paperwork will go out on the Monday after vacation. So all of our, I feel like Santa Claus this time of year, making our list, checking them twice, getting ready to greet all of our new students soon. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? No?
So you haven't put the electronic format out yet?
No,
After?
we'll go live the Monday after vacation.
Right.
And in there is a welcome letter, nurse information, CSA welcome information, extended day information, and of course the myriad of required forms and information.
I think people are really going to appreciate that.
Great, thank you. All right. Ms. McCoy.
Okay, good morning. So I would just like to echo Barb's enthusiasm about the DSEF grants that have come forth. we are able to review them in the central office and are also excited not only about the work coming out of the strategic plan and the goals, but also the combined grants that are going across schools with everybody moving in the same direction. As Barb mentioned, there's been a lot of professional development opportunities at Pine Hill. One I'd like to highlight is that we had 2 educators go to Teachers College to an inquiry based professional development where they were talking about embedding literacy in the content areas, i.e. math, science, social studies. And they have come back, and already you can see the fruits of their labors. We are going to be combining their efforts and their thinking around how to make history inquiry-based along with the new standards that are rolling out, so that's exciting. There's already ideas of how to do more real-world application problems and project-based learning experiences in math. So things are flowing and the ball is rolling, and it's really exciting. I'd like to thank Pine Hill for hosting the first meeting of the Academic Innovation Committee and the second and third as well. Between Barb and the ladies in the main office and Peter, they really had to, cut down after all school meeting and rush to get the auditorium ready for 60 folks. And I think we had a really engaging session. So I appreciate all of the efforts that the Pine Hill folks put into that, as well as those who are sitting on the committee and the homework that you're currently working on, because I know there's a lot of it. The good news is that everybody keeps sending me more and more articles and more resources. And so I say, we already have the group divided, so I can just give it to this group or this group and this group. So it's not all piling up on my plate. So that's great. The FLES program, as we know, and we've been talking about all along, is moving to the middle school next year. The students did engage with the Apple test, which is a standardized test, which we don't love, but it was a way to capture with a common ruler the proficiency levels of our students in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. The goal of the FLES program, as we know when it rolled out years ago, a lot was around exposure to other cultures and exposure to new sounds and language and building empathy and global awareness. And one piece of it was the proficiency piece, and that we were hoping students would reach the novice high level. Especially in listening and speaking. Reading and writing might come along, but looking at the results, of course, there's a range, as we know there is with any 5th grade cohort, but most of our students are there in novice high, if not intermediate low, so that's really exciting. And we had a K through 12 world language professional development on the last early release day, and the elementary teachers shared the work that they've been doing with students. The middle school shared some of the proficiency-based kind of nuanced things that they're doing with kids, moving away from the grammar and the vocabulary into the more, they were saying it's like Nike, just do it, just talk, just get used to it, just use the language. And I will say that as some of the 5th grade work moved around the room and hit the high school teachers, without talking to each other in different groups, you heard the high school teacher say, a 5th grader wrote that? And then they were asking for professional development over the summer, the high school team. So I think they're excited and nervous all at the same time that they're going to be getting this group of kids who are exposed to a language, and some that will be continuing in Spanish too. So well done there. And the last thing I'll mention is we've been doing a lot of collaborating between the 5th grade and the 6th grade teachers this year. We've had the 6th grade teachers come down and observe, I believe, the math and the English classes, and just last week we had the 5th grade team from both Pine Hill and Chickering go up to the middle school and observed the English classes there, and we're hoping to do the same thing with math, and sitting down and talking about expectations and, what do the standards look like for a 5th grader, and what should our expectations be, and how can we build on that without losing too much ground, either because of the summer or because it's a fresh start. So I think it's great, and we'll just continue to make sure that transition goes well, and then once we solidify that, we'll start the 8th to 9th grade conversations as well. Thank you. Any questions?
I just wanted to thank you for the academic innovation. I wasn't there as a teacher. I was there as a parent and a school committee rep, but it was among the best professional development I've ever had.
Oh,
it was so organized. The readings have been so rich.
Careful.
Careful. No, among the best.
I did some professional development
In
when
Sherborn,
Amanda
she
was
means.
my teacher.
She's in Sherborn. It's been the best
Very
professional
close,
development.
very close to the line.
But I just feel like it's going to be a really rich process with lots of different perspectives and a lot of focus on research, and I think it's going to be really great.
Thank you.
Excuse me?
I'm sure yours were good too.
They were.
I'm no match for her.
I just had a question. The 5th and 6th fifth grade teachers collaborating. That has happened in the past, but maybe not as much.
Right, no, there's definitely been discussions about, placing kids and visiting, with the kids to the middle school. But I think in terms of actually observing each other's classrooms and
Yeah.
seeing, how the fifth grade functions more in the elementary model and how the middle school functions, as quasi-middle school, closer to the high school realm. I think there's a lot to be said for, what could the fifth grade teachers do a little bit differently, and what could the sixth grade teachers do a little bit differently, so they don't feel so different to the
A lot of
kids.
sense. That's great.
Yeah, so, thanks.
Any other questions? Or, I think the FLES program going up is going to be exciting. Of course, we have fifth graders who are the pilot crew, but and in my house, my son Jack, who's a freshman, is taking Spanish, and just between the fifth grader and the ninth grader, trying to talk, and it's exciting. I think it's going to be neat coming up.
Do you have a sense from parents, or do you, Barb, have a sense from parents or students on how many of them will be continuing on with Spanish versus jumping into another language? That's one of the things we obviously have to consider as we think about what it's going to look like as the kids move into the middle school. Do you have any sense of that at all?
Not quite yet, but we will in the next month. The middle school administration and world language coordinator come down and meet with our students, and then parents get information about the band chorus options and the foreign language options.
It's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. But it's exciting. I
It is
agree.
exciting, enrolling up in a few years to the high school. Yeah.
Right.
I will also say, as a parent of a fifth grader, I've already seen the inquiry stuff happening in the classroom. So it's amazing how quickly your teachers are putting it into action with their learning.
Yes. My toughest judge in education is probably my daughter Mary, who sent me an email mentioning that she'd heard that we were sending people to Teachers College for this training and potentially more teachers for training with Teachers College. That is a big deal. Even she felt that it was a big deal. It really is, and I do think it spreads. It's contagious. So you sent the right people, and I think it's a testament to continuing to make those opportunities available to people. Is a testament to this system. So it's awesome.
We may need to borrow the region's passenger van.
Ha ha. Well,
I was jealous. That was where I was at school.
perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Dr. Keo.
Yes, so just to tie in with what Ms. McCoy was saying, one of the things that's really important for any school system is that we move and that we are pulling in the same direction, that there's connection. There's nothing worse than when you have this sense that the elementary schools are doing one thing, and then the middle school's doing something completely different, and then the high school's doing something completely different. That's a problem. So this actually speaks to the real benefits of our having gone through this process of developing a strategic plan that's built on the feedback from all of the stakeholders. So the strategic plan hopefully doesn't feel foreign to people. It feels linked. And you're seeing a lot of this coordination of things. We did actually go and visit with the staff at Pine Hill and at Chickering and the middle school and high school are on our agenda, to give a similar presentation to what we did with the parents about the future of DS, and to really re-emphasize and continuing to re-emphasize how these things all link up. The social emotional learning work and the innovation work, how these things all link up is important. And I thought that the teachers were very receptive to what we were saying in both of the elementary schools, which made us excited, because I think you will see things happening that are really directly connected to the things that we have set out as goals for the system. So that was awesome. Just from my report, quick highlights. The accept transportation issue, you may recall, was a concern for us. Accept provides the bulk, if not all, of our transportation for our special needs students who are going out of district. And so we kind of have a process of registering kids for transportation, and some kids require different distances, et cetera, but there's a whole kind of formula for this. And most of the accept collaborative communities participate. But if one pulls out, which is the case this year, that Framingham is going to be getting their own transportation, it created a kind of a cliff for the remaining districts. So I am happy to report that the Board of Directors has moved in a direction that suggests to me, although they have not had their final vote yet, I don't believe. And so, but it is pretty clear that they're going to use funds, existing funds, to kind of offset some of this. So we're working off of those figures in our budget. So the fact that they're applying reserve funds means it will soften the blow for us this year, but we need to keep in mind that next year those reserve funds will likely not be available.
I was going to ask that, okay, 1 year.
So, but it is a big help to us, and we're grateful to the non-transportation communities who worked with us to make this happen. Just very quickly, the meetings that I listed there, the Tech Legislative Breakfast, the MASS Midwinter Meeting, and the METCO Enrollment Meeting in Needham last week. All three of these were really fantastic, but the one takeaway that just kind of jumped out at me was that Dover Sherborn is headed in the right direction. The things that we are focusing on are actually where most systems want to be focusing and are kind of struggling to do it. The fact that we went through this process of developing our goals as a system that pull us in that direction is just a really positive thing. This, I don't know if you had the chance to see the slide presentation that I linked to by Andrew Calkins, but a real takeaway from that was this innovation, this idea that innovation and design thinking, where kids are problem solving real world problems in kind of a process, whether it's Tech High School or wherever it is, which linked up all of his presentation linked up with the video that Beth showed for the community, and links up with what we're doing with her committee. So we're really going in the right direction, so I felt really good about that. A reminder that the Start Times Task Force is still looking at school start times, still looking at where we should go as a district. And just to refresh your memories, I will be bringing with the task force some ideas forward at your joint meeting in April, and responding to your feedback to the thoughts that we have. And then in later April, if possible, based on kind of all of our work, survey data that we have in the aftermath of a training that's coming up, not a training, but a presentation to the community by Dr. Seisler, who's a kind of a sleep expert, happens to live in Sherborn. We're still doing presentations. We're doing presentations to multiple bodies. We have on the list of places we want to present to students at the secondary level, at the middle and high school. And my TV show this past week was on Start Times. It was great. I had a great conversation with a couple of juniors. And so we're continuing to educate the public and the stakeholders of the system about this. And we'll hopefully be able to bring this thing to closure by the end of this year. That's the plan. The website, just so you know, has been updated. Amanda is one of our task force members and actually spearheaded that effort to bring the start times information and the kind of the start times component of the website up to our current place. It's fantastic, so thank you for doing that, Amanda. She's been a great contributor to that process in many, many, many ways, so thank you. Dawn is also on that committee. So we've been hard at work, and we will continue to look into this and to figure out what it is that we can do that will best serve our kids, ultimately. The Director of Student Services search is underway. So the screening committee actually met this week and has put together a list of candidates that we will interview, and that begins on Monday after vacation, and then on Thursday as well. So this is a really difficult position to fill, always seems to be, but we're confident. So we're going to go through this process, and we'll keep you informed. That's my report.
Thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone have questions about Dr. Keel's report?
And then you were also given the executive summary that you included. I
Yes.
passed that out.
Right,
That's part of your
thank you.
Right,
Yeah,
that's,
that you
and that
mentioned.
relates to the second, is it the second or first?
Superintendent.
The second piece, the second paragraph, the tech legislative breakfast.
Yep.
Right, the Superintendent's Association has kind of taken a position in terms of school funding. The state at the legislative level is really digging deeply into how we're managing under the current existing system, because many districts, ourselves included, are struggling with, shifts in circuit breaker funding and Chapter 70 funds always being kind of up in the air, the governor's budget versus what the legislature comes up with. So that position paper, I think, is really helpful.
And that's been in the news a bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it has. And it has also, this morning I heard on the news mention of the Metco application
Yeah.
process. That was also
Right,
on
yeah.
there. So that's what was happening at that meeting that I attended. So
I heard that.
it's, there's a lot of good stuff happening.
You mentioned from your Metco meeting a report that is not public yet. Is it going to be? Do you know?
It
or-
will definitely be
Okay.
public, yes. There was some research done on kind of the impact of Metco on the students who've been enrolled.
Yeah.
And does some comparisons of the Boston students in the Metco program to Boston students who remain in their system and Boston students who go to charter schools. It was fascinating.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'd love to see that.
So that eventually will be made public, but it isn't yet.
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot to chew on. Yep.
Sure. That will be really interesting when that comes out.
Yep,
Thank you.
sure.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. All right, number 4, the finance report.
Good morning. Happy to be here. I've provided for you your January 31st statement of appropriations. We're slow and steady right now, so luckily the report is fairly brief. I did mention to you that there is an encumbrance in your maintenance for a replacement of one of your exterior doors. So anytime we do one of the larger projects out of your reserve, I just like to let the school committee know. So that is slated to take place hopefully next week, and that will just, it's an older door that is failing its ability to properly shut. So having a brand new door there will be welcomed by the staff, because it's the main door they go in by the teacher's lounge, teacher's workroom. The
Former teacher's workroom, because it's moved, right?
No, it's still the one room there where the
Oh, yes,
copier and
right,
stuff
yes,
is,
yeah.
yeah. So on out of district, so since we last met in November, we have had an additional placement. So I've revised your out of district numbers to have a little bit larger negative variance on tuition. We're up to the 61,637,000, bringing you to an overall negative variance right now of 83.4. Remember, we have circuit breaker funds that sort of help us with that, but then we also accommodate any out-of-district variances with any positive variances that we have in the operating fund. So we're still keeping our eye on that, but at this point in time, we don't see any reason why we won't be able to cover that with the existing funds that the school committee sort of oversees. Any questions on just the monthly status of appropriations? You also have attached your quarterly statement for your special revenue and revolving funds. These, we sort of do a roll forward for you, and it just gives you an idea of the other funds that you have out there, cafeteria, right, being one, circuit breaker, your preschool, the building rental. So you'll notice when we start talking about the fiscal year 20 budget that we'll draw upon some of these to sort of help close our gap. Any questions on that?
I have a question about the non-resident tuition.
Yes.
What, because that's gonna stop shortly, or we're not?
Potentially not.
Okay.
There's some potential additional placements that we may see coming to Pine Hill. So that's something that could,
Some of our new.
as the year progresses, there could be.
Right.
So you'll see, we haven't collected the revenue yet for this fiscal year, that's why it says 0. But we are, so as you know, we charge Dover for the per pupil expense, but we also charge them for any additional services. So the expenditures that you see there are for additional services that we are directly billing to the non-resident Right, resident tuition fund, and then Dover will give us not only the per pupil reimbursement, but also those additional costs.
Okay.
So you'll see about, I think it's about $53,000 that when we technically bill Dover will be incoming revenue for that fund to offset the direct expenses.
Makes sense, thank you.
Any other questions on the 19th? Okay. So in your packet of, the paperclip packet that I gave you, the back page should be your updated capital, and it's a bigger sheet and it's hole punched so that you can put it in your budget notebook to keep tabs. But just to briefly go over that, and I will say that between your last meeting and this meeting, we have had a meeting of the subcommittee. So both Angie and Kate met with Ralph and Peter and myself at Pine Hill, and we walked through a couple different projects, but we just sort of brought forward and so that they could actually see that we are moving forward with the kindergarten classroom and common area floors, which you had already agreed upon when we last met in November. So that was one line item that actually stayed the same. As we continue to talk about these projects and get additional information and think about the future, we have decided to delay the rooftop HVAC unit that is in your computer room, really pending additional research on temperature cooling in general in that area. So it didn't make sense, and the equipment is working fine right now, so it didn't make sense to replace equipment that was actually still functioning in case, as we go down this road, we decide to do something more mechanical from temperature cooling in that area. It would piggyback on that, so that wouldn't strap us in. So we had talked with our outside PM company for this, and also with Peter, and there was no concern that that was any issue of putting that off. So we did agree to put that off. In addition, we talked about the fire detection system devices. As we researched that more, we also don't think it makes sense to jump in and just start replacing those all at once. We spoke with, and I shall say too, in the interim, we've also had a meeting with the town's capital committee. And we spoke with them about looking at potentially phasing that replacement in over a number of years and using our operating reserves versus going all out and doing them at once. Because if they're not failing, it probably doesn't make sense to jump in. And the equipment that we're using right now with our fire control panel is a sole provider, and that would just continue to lock us into that sort of environment, so we're trying to be more open-minded. There is money in the operating fund to replace any fire detector, smoke detector that would show the trouble button. But I will say, over the last couple of years, we've only replaced 8 out of the 169. So we feel pretty confident that that's not going to be an issue, and we think it makes sense to look at that and not, like I said, go in all summer and pull them all out and replace them. So we also pushed that off. And that one may actually come off capital in total by the time we come back to you next year if we decide to streamline it over the next couple of years and put it into operating.
And can I just, sorry,
Yep.
Peter and Don explained also when I was meeting with them that if one of the fire detectors starts to go, we know.
Right, a trouble light comes on, that
So
it can't
it's not a
communicate with the
safety
fire
issue.
panel.
We're not
Exactly.
just ignoring, yeah.
Exactly, right. One thing that we decided to move forward after we walked through the school and also trying to spread the cost between years is the replacement of the library carpet. And that also includes the adjoining classroom hallway floors. As you know, it's like 3 levels there. So we'd also do all the hallways going into those classrooms with carpet tiles. So that is what we've moved forward, and we would do both those areas together off state contracts in the summer. So that's what we're bringing forward for the committee to approve is the $65,000 of capital request for fiscal year 20, including those, it's comprised of those 2 flooring projects.
So it's actually $65,000 lower than originally.
It's because of things that we've moved around.
And is there savings by combining those 2 carpeting projects?
Not really, not really, because of the state contract. And it's already the state contract pricing for both labor and supplies. What we are trying to do, though, is anytime you do a library move, a lot of times you have moving costs associated with emptying the library. We're going to try to be really cost-effective and internally do the moving, and the cost savings that we would get with that move actually purchase additional newer shelving units for the library. So we're working on that right now, and we will cover that through our operating fund. So the $30,000 that we have here is strictly for the materials and labor for the floor.
That's kind of continued upgrades to the library. It's, we're trying to chip away at things piecemeal, as opposed to making a giant request.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have questions about that before we, the motion?
Yep, move to a motion.
No questions? Okay, then I would like to make a motion to approve. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have
Oh,
questions.
yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I had to catch up on November. So can I ask those now, or would you rather me just kind of lump all mine together? Because they're all kind of personnel related.
Oh, so not capital?
Not capital.
Oh, yeah, then
Sorry.
let's do the
Okay.
capital. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
That's okay.
Okay, so we're good to move forward here. All right, I would like to make a motion to approve $65,000 for the capital budget of 2020.
Second.
All in favor? Great, for discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll let Capital Committee know that you approved it and send them the new spreadsheet.
Thank you. Great, thanks. Okay, so now we are on to continuing our discussion of the FY20 operating budget.
Yes, so just as kind of an overview, the version that Dawn will present today, sorry, actually incorporates the programming enhancements that we talked about at the last, at the joint school committee meeting with Dover.
Yep.
So hopefully you're kind of still familiar with those kinds of changes, but if you have questions along the way, feel free to ask them. It also takes into account enrollment shifts, and so these are obviously big factors in the development of this budget, so I'm going to let Dawn speak to it.
So for the new members, what we typically do is you get your book with all the details, and when we start making adjustments, before we get to the end, we just give you a summary sheet. So at the top of your summary sheet, which is the first handout that I've given you, is where we started. So that's a summary of your Pine Hill in district, and then you're out of district. So that was our starting point at the top. And then we'll walk through adjustments that we're making to get us to where we are now. And we will continue this until you meet in March. So your final vote on your budget will be your meeting in March, just so you understand sort of how it all plays out. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is really just the additional changes that we're making to the budget, not only for the SPED reorg, but also for the SPED programming. So I might jump around and our numbers will here, but I'll try to keep it sort of on topic. So as you know, when Debbie presented the SPED reorg in January, we brought in the fact that we were also centralizing our administrative assistant staffing. So with the whole picture now, I've included for you in your packet, it should be the third page, sort of analysis of the SPED reorg, where our proposed versus our current. And you've seen this before, you just haven't seen the admin assist incorporated. So now you have the admin assist. So you can see in the proposed that we have the 2 full-time 12-month people versus all the different ones that we had at the buildings all working different hours. So that is a change that you haven't seen. So Sherborn, if you go to Sherborn, and remember this is, I'm looking at fiscal year $19 in this spreadsheet. So right now, Sherborn is at $197,000 if SPED support. The new reorg is bringing you to 206. So that's basically, you can see it's a little bit of an uptick. You can't take those numbers though, I will tell you, and come up with the adjustment, because I've all gone on and I've built the fiscal year 20 budget, which already had some salary increases in it. So to get you to where we need to be for the proposed SPED staffing for next year, I needed to put an additional $8,300 in your budget. So that's your first adjustment there. And just so you know, what I also do is I put your function code. So if you try to go back to your big sheets, you can see where in your budget that's going to lie.
So just to recap that, you're saying that the current figures where we have that 197.70 versus the proposed are actually incorporating in the increases.
No, the
Or not.
proposed was not. And
Not.
so when I built the budget though, right, when I did fiscal year 20, I already sort of incorporated some increases, so you.
Right.
But that
But
just
it
gives
is
you a
caught somewhere, is
generality.
what I'm saying.
Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So to get you to where we need to be in fiscal year 20 salary costs, I'm picking up $8,300. So that's the SPED reorg. The next thing we'll talk about is, as you know, Debbie presented that we wanted to create a autism program here to really support the existing students that you have at Pine Hill with the services they need to continue to be in district. So that she mentioned, she laid out the framework of that, but that it would include a full-time educator in the classroom. So that is, we're picking up the new autism program educator at a 1.0. And it has to be an experienced person to be able to manage, right, the needs of the students. So we are putting a placeholder of $90,000 in for that position. Included in with that is also an increase in BCBA support. So based on what Pine Hill currently has versus what we are forecasting you need for next year. It's a combination of supporting the autism program, but also just supporting your in-district SPED programming. We're looking to increase by 0.5, which is approximately $34,000 increase for that. Looking at services we needed too, we're also increasing your OT. If you remember in your fiscal year 19 report, I told you your line item for that is over because we've had to bring in contracted services for OT coverage for this year based on the student needs, so we're incorporating that into the budget for next year. But we also have a staffing change with personnel that's allowing us to do this with very nominal increase in salaries, so that's $3,600. They also looked at the outside speech services that we're currently using, and based on in-house capacity and the IEP needs, we're going to be able to reduce outside speech services by half, which is $12,500. So those are sort of the special ed programming, both the new program and existing services that we're adjusting for in this version of your budget. Any questions on that before I head into the next section? So the classroom, basically, the students will be their home base will be a regular ed classroom, but this classroom will be there to support them as needed, and so it does need the appropriate staff to be able to do that.
And I would just add, because it's really important to reiterate, the fact that these students will have an opportunity to stay in their home school system and receive the same kinds of services that they would receive in an out-of-district placement, yet receive that benefit from being with their peers, their gen ed peers, is a really good thing. So that was the rationale for this, and we recognize that it's a request for funds, but we also need to emphasize just how expensive it would be to educate one individual with these kinds of challenges outside of school in the range of probably $100,000.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question about space? Is there space at Pine Hill for this additional dedicated classroom?
We're reducing a classroom section, and we're reducing a preschool section next year, so we'll be picking up space.
Okay.
Susan?
So questions, so the autism students that you'd be servicing, are they currently enrolled?
Yes,
And they have been enrolled for how long?
they're in the younger grade. They're in preschool kindergarten.
They're in preschool, so they're rolling up.
Yes.
So and so will they be able to roll up if you don't offer this program?
Most likely not.
So they'll go out of district?
Yes.
And if they go out of district, can you use the circuit breaker fund that Pine Hill has a projected balance on to cover the costs of those out of district costs?
So your circuit breaker only kicks in after you've hit 4 times your foundation. So you would have to pay the first $45,000 of out-of-district placement with existing funds. Then your circuit breaker would reimbursement. So,
Do you have a projection of what those costs would be for that person to go out of district?
yeah, $100,000.
$100,000?
Yeah, most programs, because we, if Debbie was here, so Debbie had to be at another meeting when we rescheduled, so we did ask her what the placement cost. And there's a couple different schools where they take these placements, but they're all in the $100,000 range,
Plus transportation.
plus transportation.
Okay, so we'd be on the hook for about 45 though? And then,
Yes.
and then circuit breaker
For
could kick in.
for each student who would go out.
Okay, so how many students are we projecting are going out?
Well, in the report that was presented, I think the.
Sorry, I was deathly ill for the last
Yeah,
meeting,
yeah. There's, I think 4 to 7 students are potential at Pine Hill alone to use this program.
Right now in the preschool, there's 47 that
No,
we saw.
in Pine Hill, in general. In the K-5, in the pre-K to, say, 4, because we wouldn't
Okay.
include, right? Right now, there was a population, I believe it was 5 to 7.
That are on the spectrum somewhere,
Exactly.
that would be serviced by this.
That would be
I get
serviced
that
by this
part,
program.
But who's going, I want to understand how many we know would need to go out of district if we don't have this program.
It's
Just the one in
impossible,
preschool?
it's really impossible to predict what, because people, generally speaking, would prefer that their kids stay in-house, but what traditionally has happened here, and this is what the audit, the special education audit, why it was so important, found, was that people eventually, at some point, these students hit a wall and need more supports and kind of programmatic supports that we aren't able to provide either in Sherborn or in Dover. And so the recommendation was that the program be developed, and that if Dover has children and maybe in a small cohort, that they also be able to send over as well at the cost, just as we've done with the other students, where that line in the
And
comes
I
from.
totally get that and I totally support keeping kids in district, but we're coming back, we had our meeting on Wednesday night, that we were supposed to talk about this, but we have recrunched our numbers and learned new information that hasn't been shared among department heads yet. Steve's working on it, but we're at guidance, and the FTEs are way over guidance. So, and we just don't, he's gonna reiterate that we're gonna go all back to all the department heads and everybody's gotta go back to guidance. So we have some parameters in the town that have changed from a real estate value. There's a lot of factors that go into the equation. So, but we're solidly at guidance. So I'm trying to find you, how many kids have hit that wall, and do we have other solutions for those kids in the budget?
Yeah, because the other issue is the ones that even stay in district are going to need additional support. So this is actually the most efficient and economical way to.
In the long term, yeah,
Yeah,
but
right.
a way to hiccup
But even-
and maybe postpone
Right.
for another year. So that's what I want to try and understand.
Yeah, but
So
this
how
is
many
the-
kids of
yeah.
that 7
Yeah.
have hit that wall that they're out of district?
Yeah.
So, and we don't know the wall that Andrew talked about, and we don't know that, we just know of one.
Enough to make this program worthwhile. That if you didn't do it,
Absolutely.
you'd have more cost if you didn't do this program. So you're not saving.
We have other sources. I mean, you can use circuit breaker, so we.
But circuit-
I mean, we
think
have
about-
other
When you
abilities
talk
to pay
about
for it.
circuit breaker, though, what are you talking about, circuit
That's a
breaker?
circuit breaker fund, so if we're on the hook for the 40.
So you mean your stabilization fund?
Right, the fund that you
Stabilization.
just talked about that has a projected balance of 193,000.
Oh, we're gonna use, though, a lot of that's gonna fund, it's already incorporated into funding fiscal year 20 budget. So we don't have that money to go back to.
So the
for these
193 balance at June 30, 2019 that you're projecting isn't available
No,
to
because,
offset these.
But can I interject something? Let's, if I may,
Yeah.
let's have Dawn go through this, because I think when you go through her whole explanation, these questions will be answered. I'm
Okay.
pretty confident.
okay, so that is your, no, so now we need to go, sorry. Reduction in classroom is something that Barb mentioned, and that is an adjustment that we're looking to do. In your packet, I had given you 2 pieces of information regarding enrollment. One is your projections that we updated with a more current kindergarten number. That's the only change that was made on your long-term projection was, if you look at kindergarten for 2019-20, you've got 62 there instead of your previous one that had 55. And that's really just so you can look at your long-term projections. It has no impact on your current year projections that we're looking at for fiscal year 20, but it gives you the longer-term perspective. So we updated that. Similar to last year, we've put together sort of an scenario analysis for you to say, okay, so let's look at our class sizes now. So the top section says if every class as is now just moves down to the next grade and the teachers stay where they are, what would we look like from a section by section basis? Anything that you see in yellow shows you where you're below your classroom guidelines, class size guidelines. So then we take the next step and we say, okay, this is what we're proposing that we do. And as you see, the light blue shading grades is where we are recommending that we shift 1 second grade teacher down to 3rd grade. And you can see the impact that has on your class sizes, right? That gets us where we need to be. And if you go down and look at 5th grade, we're recommending that we do reduce a section of 5th grade. And you can see now then the yellow goes away from that. So we're looking to follow the one cohort of students that's just as large. That teacher will probably continue to follow that cohort as they progress through Chickering. And we are suggesting that we reduce 1 classroom section. So that is your $60,000 reduction that we're able to incorporate into the budget. Any questions on that? Okay. So then that gets us to our in-district final of looking still at a $280,000 increase in your in-district budget. Moving on to out-of-district, as I mentioned to you in our 19 monthly statement, we did pick up an additional out-of-district placement. So I've incorporated that into your fiscal year 20 projections. And so we do have an increase in tuition of about $35,000. What I did do, though, was go back and look at how we were applying circuit breaker funds, what I had potentially left over also that I felt comfortable that we could carry forward for fiscal year 20, and I'm applying an additional $100,000 to offset your general fund using circuit breaker funds. So in total, we're using $315,000 of circuit breaker money to offset your general fund out-of-district expense. So that gets you to a bottom line of a total overall ask of $299,000, about 4.23% increase. As you know, as Susan said, on guidance, so the guidance from Sherborn Advisory was that we got 2% of salaries as our increase from fiscal year 19 to 20. That equates to $106,965. So when we apply that, you can see that the gap that we're starting with right now over what they're allowing the school committee is $211,000. As we did last year, we sit back and we say, okay, what additional funds do we potentially have to help offset the general fund? So your additional funding sources section at the bottom, we are suggesting that we utilize additional grant funds, so reallocating some of the funds that we've used other places in prior years and some additional funds we feel comfortable applying. So $25,000 to apply for the position of the literary specialist. And we have been building up the non-resident tuition fund. And so we're looking to apply $25,000 of that fund to the current year operating. That gets us down to a gap of $161,000. What I thought it would be helpful for the committee then is to see what sort of makes up that $161,000 that we're asking for, and that's your next page. So there's a couple different pieces of it. So additional analysis of the new request. So the literary specialist, we're looking at that we're covering the cost of that by, in your first version of your budget, you had savings from a retirement of one of your specialist teacher. So actually, let me step back. This is taking version 1 and version 2 and pulling it all together so you can see the whole picture, right? Because some of this stuff we've added in version 1, some we've added in version 2, but this is pulling it all together for you. So the literacy specialist, basically we're able to say that the savings from a retirement and the use of applicable grant funds means that that's a zero. Applying those funds that way gives us a zero request for that position. For the autism program, if you add up everything that we need, it's $144,000. The additional SPED support, go back to version 1, we've increased the psychologist by 0.2. That's the $20,000. We've picked up the SPED reorg of $8,300 and then the O2 of $3,600, and that gets you to $3,190. We also, though, have some offsets that we can apply to the SPED programming. We just reduced the classroom section by the $60,000. We're utilizing $25,000 from the non-resident tuition fund, and we've reduced our speech services. So if you take all the starred numbers and add them up, the net request of required services that we're looking for is $78,400. But then to go on, part of our budget increase is a salary, so our contractual salary adjustments that are above and beyond the 2% that Sherborn guidance has allowed us. So if you go over to the right-hand side, you'll see that our salary increases, if you exclude all the new positions that we added, are at a 3.2% increase versus the 2% that's allocated. So barring nothing else, we need an additional $64,000 to be able to make whole the contracts that we already have set in place for the employees that we currently already have here in the building. Or actually not at this building, but at your building. So that is $64,000. And then as you saw, we are looking for an additional $19,000 for the out of district. So when you put those three pieces together, that's what makes up the $161,000 of additional requests that we are asking for from the reserve fund that they have set aside. So there will be a quiz afterwards, but hopefully everyone can
it's good.
sort of piece it all together and sort of understand. I think it's really important for you guys to understand sort of what your ask is and have it, the different components so that you know what we really have no wiggle room with and what, you may have wiggle room with.
So I don't know if that makes clear your question about the out-of-district money and applying some of that out-of-district money.
Well, does the current, if I go back to that, does the current autistic student have an aide?
Yes.
A one-on-one aide?
Some of them, right. So we're trying to streamline that.
So there'd be savings there
We're
for that aide when they go out, if they were to go out of district?
That's built into our well, if they went out of district, they all don't have one-to-ones.
Okay, but they have partials?
Yeah, but
So-
we've built, so by having them go into the support of this program, we are using less one-to-ones, but that staffing is incorporated into
Your projection
the,
for
pro-
FY '20.
exactly.
So you've reduced
We're
the other
reallocating.
aid, the other expense and moved it to the
Right.
autism program.
Right.
So- And the reserve, the fund that you talked at the end of your speech, the 400K, the
Yes,
pinata
yeah.
that I don't like the term,
Yes.
is gone. It doesn't exist.
Okay.
So we are truly back to guidance, and even guidance had the 400, and so we don't even, at this point, we don't even have guidance. But we're asking all the budget makers to go back to guidance. So, as a budgeting tool. And that, again, I apologize, Steve has been trying to log calls into department heads, and we are volunteers, so he does have a full-time
Yeah,
job, and
yeah.
that's just an evolution since our meeting very late Wednesday night. So, based on, again, new data that just, you could say, why didn't you guys see this coming? Well, we just learned a couple of data points new to us that he'll call and educate you, or that we can after the meeting, so we're at guidance.
But guidance doesn't even get us to cover our contractual obligations? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that.
You and, yeah, all the other departments as well, so.
Can I ask a question about the audit district? If I recall, the prior iteration was assuming 215,000.
Right, right.
Now we're back to 315, am I understanding that?
Yes, we've increased it to 315.
Okay.
Right.
But I'm also seeing using 50% reimbursement rate.
Right.
Significantly lower than we've been getting so years. So is there a difference?
So we don't, you've got to have, that's our safety net though. And we talked about this with advisory last year. You do not want to have your budget come down to using 100% of your circuit breaker, because when we moved up to 65% 2 years ago, my first year, and we had to come back to the town and ask for $70,000.
That was the 300K out of district
Exactly.
students.
So we, and I think when we talked with Stephen this year and last year, he was very comfortable that we left ourselves a little safety net, because in the long run, it helps the town. And then what we do is when we have it, we are able then to apply it to the next year. But it's a way, you don't want to use 100% of your circuit breaker to offset your general fund. It leaves you nothing in case you have placements that we didn't budget for.
The 315 is representing the 50%.
The 315 is a combination of me using additional funds that we don't look like we're going to need this year and adding that to 50% reimbursement.
I have a question, Don. In this proposed autism program, we're not talking about one student being in there. We're talking about, you said 5 to 7.
And in there, it varying, so as Debbie mentioned, every you cannot identify really an autistic student. You've seen one, you have not seen, right, all of them, because they're so different. So we have varying intensity.
ASD is the autism spectrum disorder.
Right.
These kids are in various places on the autism spectrum disorder, and we really like to speak in those terms because we're not seeking to identify students.
Right, and we also aren't looking at this as a one-year fix. We see students coming up through that are already going to stay in pre-K, they're going to need this program. And we see students at Chickering who may need a program like this. We think they're going to be able to be covered at Chickering next year, but if not, the fact that that was one of the things the consultant said would be really smart on our part is to start building the in-house program so that we could accommodate the cohorts together.
And to reemphasize that the auditors or consultants highlighted for us that the places that we are losing students to out-of-district placements, and circuit breaker does not cover the cost. It helps with it, it offsets it. The places that we are losing students, and again, it's not just about the money. If it was apples to apples, we'd still want the students in-house because that's a better educational setting with their like peers. So that's always our preference. But where we're seeing these upticks and kind of higher outplacements are in the elementary autism spectrum disorder category and not just in K. It's as these kids continue on, the gap grows larger. So that's why, and it makes sense that that's an area of concern. And then the other one is the social emotional students typically at the 6 through 8 level and the 11, 12 level. So those are where our bubbles are. So those are where we're looking to apply services in order to kind of stop this trend. Because when that trend starts, it's really difficult to pull it back.
So there is additional guidance that the region doesn't need. So I would hope that that would be something that the schools could share in. Because if you look at what you've allocated for the region, our assessment increase does not reach that.
I think that was 20, at the last version, that was 27. Like I said, we can't even cover guidance anymore at this point. So if we can't cover guidance, we're gonna go back to the region too and say the same thing. Can you sharpen your pencils? Can you pull anything? Can you defer anything? Can you find other sources for anything? I'm not begrudging.
Right.
I would love to bring people in district and put this program in. Me personally, I get a kid, not autistic, but he's on the spectrum. So I totally get the various spectrums, and I agree with bringing the programs in. It's got nothing to do with how I put my parent hat on and how I feel there. So it's the realities of the numbers and the tax rate increase. I mean, when we started our analysis the other night, we're at 1962. That's our tax rate for this year, right? We were at 21, over $21. So, but we cut out a lot. And Steve's probably going to shoot me. We cut out a lot, and we are still looking at an increase. We would love to tell people no increase, but we are still looking at a FY20 increase. So, and those are the realities of things. If I could change it, believe me, I would. If we could find money, and those are the things that we're telling budget makers is, for the things that you're asking that are special for the next fiscal year, if we find it, we'll put it back in. And we can add that back in. So do you need the literacy specialist because the autism is more important, and you found, Dawn, you're doing an amazing job of finding offsets.
Yeah.
So
I think if I could just add one thing in response to that. We get that. That's actually the whole reason there is a goal about being as efficient as possible. If you look at the ask from the region or from Chickering or for Pine Hill, there's not a lot of fluff. It's about trying to maintain or improve our services in the most efficient way possible. This is an efficiency. We see this as an efficiency. This is something that will ultimately save the system money. And when systems choose to kick the can down the road to a year when it's better, which never happens, then the issue doesn't really get fully addressed. That's why we've put this forward.
So I guess it'll be important for us to get then the guidance communicated to this committee so that we can go back and sit and we'll have to figure out if that's really what it's going to be. Where do we go with this? I mean, obviously, we've got the contractual salary increase that's something that we have to deal with.
And
how
it's got to impact not only that, but futuristic. They'll be rolling into a new salary contract negotiation next year.
Right.
You'll be starting that process. So
Exactly.
that has to be, from the Sherborn side, I can't speak to the other side of the river, but from the Sherborn side, that has to be a clear understanding. So and the outlook isn't pretty. Real estate values are dropping in this town. Guaranteed. There will be a number of wealthy homes or large homes in this town that are going to be reassessed at lower values because they're not selling anywhere near what they start at. So that is the reality. We're not developing in this town. We don't build, we don't build big either. So we're not getting the revenue. Then that's all Sherborn has for revenue. Get little dollars here and there, but all Sherborn has is property tax base. So those are the realities that unfortunately we can't change here. I'm sorry.
If I may, just doing a little bit of quick math, and I First of all, I want to say we do appreciate all of the efforts at finding efficiencies, and we do understand what you're saying about this program, so I don't want people to think that we don't appreciate that. Recognizing that, just doing a little bit of quick math, if the literacy specialist, if the .2 psychologist were not in the budget, if the section is still reduced, then it's 40,000. If you were still willing to kick in the 25,000 non-resident tuition fund, that's 150 right there. That almost closes the gap. So it's not up to me to suggest how the budget should be built, but there are some levers that can.
So if the 65,000, what was the other thing how are you getting to the 100? So the literacy specialist, 65, okay, so.
65 for literacy.
Yeah, so where are the other?
Reducing a section appears to be 40.
No, we already
That's
reduced,
built in the 160.
that's savings from retirement.
That's the okay.
Six for retirement.
Yeah, that's already in there, though. That's already in the numbers.
But it's in there as an offset to the literacy specialist.
Right, but if we take out the 65, so if you take out the 65, yes, the 40 would be there to cover part of the autism program.
Right. So
But 65, that's all you can pull it, right.
Right. Then, well, 65, I'm sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding. 65 is the cost of the literacy.
Exactly.
Literacy specialist.
Right.
So that's out completely.
Exactly.
Plus you have retirement of 40.
But that 40,000 of the retirement, if I take out 65, the 40's there. You wouldn't double.
You're saying that's already been built into?
Yes, yes. Yeah, these numbers have already been built into the budget. I'm just showing you how they can be allocated to the request. So that 40,000 savings from retirement was in version 1 of our budget. If you go back and look at your big sheets,
217, yeah.
it's already in there.
All right, so then it's 85, I guess. It's-
Right. Okay, that's what you're doing. Can figure out how to get up to that. Well, that'll just be something that we may have to reconvene and spend some time looking at, if that's going to be the guidance that does come forward. Right now, we were working on the guidance that we were given, so.
Right. And again, I apologize, that's our new evolution from Wednesday. So,
Here, Nancy Long's still in there. Okay, so that's where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all your hard work, your questions. We will take a good look at all of this. Any further questions or discussions on what Dawn presented?
To be continued.
To be continued. Thank you very much. Okay, that moves us to our consent agenda. We need to approve the minutes and then accept the donation, correct? Okay. So I move to approve the minutes from our November 13th and January 22nd meetings. A second. All in favor? Thank you. And then I'd like to make a motion to accept a donation of $13,600 from the Sawin Fund. Second. All in favor? Great, thank you. And thank you to the Sawin Fund for that donation. Okay, the other things in our packets are just communications. Future meetings, I just noticed it says, meeting with advisory February 13th, obviously.
So you look to see whether or not we could just piggyback on the 27th if we started at 6:15?
everybody's weighing in, I think, right now,
Yeah, we
so.
don't have firm, it's unclear whether we would have quorum at that time. Is there any option potentially to put it in the meeting after the regional discussion?
Region first, is that all we have on our agenda then? You guys are it for the night, so
Right. But yeah, we could do that.
that would be,
Right. So we'll start at 7. That meeting starts at 7.
and you
So
can go
this
in
one-
whatever order you want to go in. So
Well,
you could do.
Well,
I think the region.
The region knows they're at 7,
want-
so
yeah.
we would
Okay,
go
so
at
they
7,
want- okay.
yeah. And because in Dover Warrant gets to leave, right? So it's just
Right.
Sherborn School Committee coming, or just Kate and Andrew and I meeting with
Yep.
advisory. So we can just do that at the end. Whoever's, right? Yeah.
might be running a little late.
Well, I think we should be able to, like, 8, I think the region's budget's pretty
True.
straightforward, so.
True.
Yeah, we can definitely do it at the later
On the-
time slot. It was the
Yeah.
6:15
Perfect. Okay.
time.
Okay.
Perfect, that's
But
awesome.
we don't have anything else as of right now.
Yeah, so we'll just follow then the region. Okay, that's fine.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
But, okay. Gotta figure this out. Okay.
All right, I believe that is everything we have. Is there anything else anyone would like forward? No? Then thank you, everybody, for all of your hard work.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned at 12:45.